Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined this week by Ed Pye. Ed, due to scheduling issues, we were unable to record last week, after that double header of the women's game in South Africa, the men's game in Edmonton. But this now means instead of just two games to talk about, we have three games because not only do we have the men's match versus Belgium, but the men's match versus Spain as well. Before we get into those two games, let's go back to the start of that Saturday, early rise, 7 a.m. to get that game versus the Springbok women. The final of the Canadian Women's Tour to South Africa, acting as the curtain raisers for the games against Italy. And, we said that we want to see a bit of rotation, and we definitely got that this time around. And, it was a very strong game for Canada as usual. We had Casil getting the first try after 5 minutes, Boa getting a second in the just before half time, and ending up with Norston, Boom and Skirfield getting tries in the second half. And South Africa, they were left scoreless in the first half, able to eke out a try towards the end of the second half. Final score 33-5 for Canada. But it wasn't without some issues and concerns. And unfortunately, it has been confirmed today that Rory Wood, who went down injured in that game, has been ruled out of the Women's Rugby World Cup, which is, absolutely heartbreaking for her. And we at the Rouge Rugby wish her the swiftest of recoveries. It may not mean much at the moment with this devastating news, but we wish Wood all the best and hope that we can see her back in the Maple Leaf jersey once again. But Ed, what did you make of this match?
Yeah, I think a good finish to the tour there. And I think, in terms of the goals that they would have set before they went on the tour, developing some depth, getting some of their bigger players more game time, just rotating that squad and getting through a number of players, giving them international experience. I think that's job well done. Winning both games relatively convincingly. So check done there as well. The bonding experience that they'll get out of touring a place like South Africa is going to be massive for them as well. So apart from those injuries, I think a good job all round.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, job done. Yeah, picking up two wins against South Africa, a team that is, significantly lower in the rankings than Canada. I think that was to be expected. And it is all building this momentum in preparation for the World Cup in England, which is now, you know, about a month away. And, we've still got two more games to look forward to for the Canadian women before the World Cup. We have this upcoming game in Ottawa on August the 1st against the United States before the team travel to Ireland to take on the Irish women. And then it's definitely all eyes on the Women's Rugby World Cup. And so, yeah, I think it's a very double-edged sword because you want to have your players in the best possible position they can be in, but there's always going to be a risk coming with that. And we've seen that with Rory Wood. And, the week prior, we saw like Fancy Bermudez go down, and we were all concerned if she was going to make the World Cup. Obviously, Rugby Canada came out with a statement in their press release saying that she had been medically cleared and invited to rejoin the team. Kevin Ray also emphasized that he was focused on cycling players and getting players to have as much game time as possible, which meant that certain players that started the first test, regardless of how successful they were in that test, wouldn't be showing up in the second, but that was already planned. It is now like that cautious time where you're hoping that players aren't going to, put a step wrong and then destroy their ACL or be caught on the wrong side of a rock or anything along those lines. But it's also these games that give the team opportunity to be prepared for the World Cup because that is going to be the most physically intensive competition they'll be in women's rugby. And so, you got to be prepared for that. Uh,
One of the best pieces of advice I ever got from a coach was that if you try and not get injured, you're gonna 100% get injured. So, hopefully they're not holding anything back in these games in the idea that they may get injured for the World Cup. You got to put it all out there on the field.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, well, it's also been announced that we are recording on Wednesday, the 23rd of July, and I think just an hour before, Rugby Canada announced they're gonna have the Women's World Cup squad announcement tomorrow. So we're unfortunately not having it on this episode. We'll include it in our next episode when we go over the USA game. And of course, plans can change as we've seen with Rory Wood. Injuries can happen. You may have to the players that you want to take and the players you actually take to the World Cup may not be the exact same list. So you got to be prepared for that. But ultimately, as you said before, job done. Coming back from South Africa, 2 wins, both in the ballpark of nearly 30 plus points put on the Springbok women. I think is getting good momentum, good headspace, and a winning mentality. And, go show Canada still undefeated this year. They've racked up their fourth win, one draw, and they'll be hoping to continue those winning ways in England in August and September. Now, let's take it from South Africa back to Canada, specifically Edmonton, as we had the men hosting two sides from Europe. First up was Belgium, and second up was Spain. We'll focus on the Belgium game first. This was the first game under Stephen Meehan, and on the last episode we did say, this seems like a weakened side we're not really expecting to see at the PNC. And I mentioned that it was, it's a double-edged sword for me, and he has to both qualify for the World Cup and bleed new players in the space of a few weeks. And ultimately that came to pass. Belgium, they finished as I believe like Europe 5 in their qualification, which means that they are going to the repechage tournament that will be hosted by the United Arab Emirates later this year. And they themselves, we've been talking about momentum, want to get their own momentum going. They want to be getting some wins. They already had that historic win against the Netherlands that got them into this position. Now they face Canada for only the fourth time in their international test history. But this was a completely different Belgium side. The last two times Canada faced Belgium, they were able to nil them on both occasions. This time, Belgium really seemed to come out of the blocks, really wanted to put their edge on it. Obviously, Canada were able to get a couple scores, a couple penalties, were leading at half time, but the second half, I think that was all Belgium with the momentum. They were able to score 10 points, take that lead and just go with it. And eventually Canada was able to pick up a consolation try at the end. But yeah, this was disappointing. Belgium's first win against Canada, not really the start I think Mian was expecting, but lots to, focus on. Tries for Josiah Mora, Andrew Quattrin in the first half, Perry picking up that try to close out the game. Cooper Coates unable to get any conversions, only able to score a penalty. And yeah, I think this I think this was like a lose situation, as in if there's any time to lose, it's when you're not attempting to qualify for the Men's Rugby World Cup. So this was a game where I was like, okay, it's his first game. We know Canada haven't been, successful in results over the past few years. I'm going to give Meehan the benefit of the doubt. And for the first half, it looked like things were, you know, at least going Canada's way. But then the second half, Belgium just turned it around, were able to assert their dominance, and they were the ones picking up the win at the end. But that was like my impression. Ed, what did you make of this game?
Yeah, I know. Like, it's interesting to think back to when we were saying, oh, this seemed more like an experimental team. I think as pundits, we look at selections at the beginning of a coach's reign or the beginning of a season, and we're like, well, these players on paper seem to be better, so why are they actually selecting these experimental players? I actually think when we saw the game plan play out, it became pretty obvious why he selected some of the players that he had selected. They've got obviously they're playing with quite a bit of width. They're really targeting the breakdowns. You saw that in the second game with Spain as well. They're putting a lot of players into the breakdown to try and get turnovers there. So I think there was a couple of selections. Owaru was incredible in the game, and again in the Spanish game, just a really good selection there that maybe wasn't the obvious one at the end of Major League Rugby, but he was very good in both games. So that's a really good to have someone. I think he's basically locked his position, and now at 8, I would think, unless you get an Ardron or someone like that coming back. But I think overall, some of the I guess we talk about Coates. Distribution was good. Moving from 15 to 10. There's a question around how he would go there, but I thought he was pretty solid as well. His kick to set up Mora for the try was well executed. So I don't think
Mm,
he got a place at 10 at all there. So I think, there's a couple of things there that Meehan would have been looking at to see, is this going to be my player for this position? And some of those players stood up and played well in those roles.
yeah.
Um, I think the Belgium counterattack was the key to the victory. Like, they were just
Mm,
very good when they turned the ball over and were able to break out, from their own half. They were throwing offloads out of the back of the hand, and a couple of them just came off really well. So I don't actually think it was a terrible performance from Canada. I guess the thing is you want to win, obviously, but I think they got a few good things out of that game that they would then take forward into the Spanish game as well.
Yeah, I think bringing back to Cooper Coates is that when most fans think of a 10, they think of like, stepping up to the tee, kicking, and, accumulating points, and that's what a 10's mostly known for. But as the game has evolved, kicking has become an in-play tactic that can produce huge benefits. And I think Coates is really well versed at that. I mean, as you just mentioned with the Morris try, was set up from a kick off Coates to get into position for that. And I think that Coates is plays as an attacking 10, is able to locate areas of the field where players can get to and can, if they can't score the try, they can at least make the yards to get closer to the try line. Um,
I think one caveat there though, Stu, is that his attacking kicking was excellent, like really, really good with his little kicks through, the assists and those types of things. His strategic kicking, that's the question. Like, does he have
mm,
the strategic kicking game to when
mm,
you get into these close games, when you're, down a point or so, is it better to play territory or is it better to just attack the whole time? So I think
mm.
that's something they'll try and add into his game over the next couple of opportunities that he has.
Yeah, I think yeah, it was definitely the one on that we had a big question over going into the game, and I think Coates was able to step up and get that answered. There was other players in positions that were like, okay, that was good for the experiment. Maybe let's not do that again. But again, this isn't qualifying for the World Cup, so this is the time to do those experiments. Um, but if the first game against Belgium was a inexperienced new squad that we're trying to get our grips with, the squad that was selected against Spain was definitely familiar. We obviously had the return of Evan Olmsted. for the first time since 2019 and looked like he hadn't missed a step. Spencer Jones into at the centers. And then we also had Ethan Pryor, and there was a few other players on the bench. And for reasons that are going to become kind of obvious when going over the game, a number of them weren't brought in. But yeah, so we had this match against Spain. Now, if you had told me the results of the Spain game prior to me watching it, I personally, I would have taken it. I would have been okay with that, especially after the results in 2022 and 2023. There's a 22 and a 21 point difference between Canada and Spain. But yeah, I think this is the type of Canada that we've been, wanting to see for the past, you know, 6, 7, 8 years. And it was one of the things of like everything's finally clicking together. Spain obviously different from Belgium. They have already qualified for the World Cup. They've just come off a victory against the United States. They have the momentum behind them, but Canada definitely demonstrated the drive of these are the teams that we need to be beating in order to return to the World Cup. And it looked like that at every single instance. Evan Olmsted, always jackling for the ball. And yeah, and the back row as a whole was phenomenal. Obviously we have like Lucas Rumble. He's has his experience. This was his 60th cap for Canada as well in this game. And then obviously we have Ororu picking up two tries in this match. And I mentioned Spencer Jones earlier. He was in the right place at the right time to charge down that kick, get it over to Ororu, and get Canada that incredible momentum boost they needed. Now, though, we have to mention the negatives, which just comes down to indiscipline. Cali Martinez picking up a yellow card, his front row substitution of Emerson Pryor coming on, and then 5 minutes later he gets yellow carded, so he's in the sin bin as well. So Canada now down to 13 players, and Spain, took the opportunity and went with it. Canada still remained in the lead. Peter Nelson picking up a lot of points from the boot, which is fantastic to see, and it's good to have kicking options. And I think, yeah, I think this was a very cleverly planned game. And like Jason Higgins as well, his box kicking was, very on point, finding the locations that it needed to. But ultimately, it came down to the final few plays of the game. Canada in Spain's 22 looked as though they were going to try and score, and then the ref blew their whistle penalty to Spain. And to be honest, as soon as that happened, I knew that Spain had won the game. This is a team that has spent the last two World Cup cycles being denied getting to the grandest stage because of eligibility issues. They have been wanting this for now coming up to like, I think at this point, 10 years. And they were desperate to, they've been desperate in the past, but they've been focused now. And that's all it took. When they did decide to go for the line out right at the death, I was like, oh, hang on. Are we getting flashes of England, Wales in the 2015 World Cup? Are they going to throw the line out short? Is Canada going to overturn this and kick it into touch? No, obviously, wishful thinking. It was a knock on at the end of that play, but penalty from earlier meant that it was going back to the boot. And with only 2 points between it, that penalty sailing over secured Spain victory at the death. The final score Canada 23, Spain 24. Heartbreaking, isn't it, Ed? It's the hope that gets you. But, that was my view of the game is, you know, when watching it, I was like, Canada can actually win this. But previously thinking like, anything less than 20 is a win at this point. So it may be a moral victory if it's not an on-field one. But what did you make of the game?
Yeah, yeah. So you make some good points there. I mean, I think it was a significant improvement
Mm,
on the game plan and strategy that Meehan had instituted in the first game. And you can take a lot of positives out of that. Number one being that the players that he brought in, the experience that he brought in, added a huge amount to the strategy I think that they were trying to play. Having Peter Nelson as a second kicker, a strategic kicker just takes a lot of pressure off Coates. It puts Canada in the right areas of the field. So I think that was a significant improvement there. Um, Canada again, like you could see from the first game that they were trying to get on the ball a lot, get a lot of defensive turnovers. Adding Olmsted into the pack just sort of turbocharged that. And the other player who was really great over both games was Quatrin. He
mm.
was going and challenging for the ball as well, and his set piece play was really strong as well. Along with the mauls and everything. Um, so I thought Canada played really well, man. It was really disappointing that they just couldn't pull it out at the end.
Mm.
Um, Spencer Jones, I think, has got to be locked on for the 12. I think he's the strongest, most abrasive running midfielder that Canada has at the moment. And maybe they bring Lesage in later on, but he was really good as well. So yeah, I think the one thing I might have said about them challenging so many rucks because they were on everything, like every defensive ruck they had players going in when you're getting towards the end of the game, you're in this one score final, minute of the game, and Spain are pressuring you inside your own half. Maybe that's when you get your more experienced players to come in and say, "Let's just not challenge as hard. Let's just let them make the mistake. We don't want to give away a penalty here." A little bit more experience in the team, probably somebody would have stepped up and said, "This is how we've got to play it." They just continued to challenge like that, and that ended up, getting the penalty there. So um, I think it's a really good learning experience for them. But I think the way that they could take so much out of the way that they played in that game and the players that stood up in the positions that are going to be vital for Canada in the coming games. So I think they'd be pretty happy. The only other thing to say is that it's now a 7 game losing streak. So
Mm.
that pressure starts to build. And then, if you're playing these World Cup qualifying matches that have more pressure on them, you got to turn those
Mm.
into wins rather than continue on the losing streak.
That is true. However, all it takes is one win, and Canada finds themselves going to Australia in 2027. So I feel as though that this game against Spain cemented that Canada does have the ability to be a challenge for some of these teams that are ranked towards like 15 or between 15 and 20, despite currently being 25th in the world rankings. Um, but yeah, I think that the opportunity can present itself. And as I said, all it takes is one win. I mean, look at Zimbabwe versus Namibia. Zimbabwe just needed to win that one game, and now they're on the way to the World Cup. Uh, like I said before, Belgium versus the Netherlands. All it took was Belgium needing to get that one win, and now they're in the repechage. So I think that's what Canada really just needs to focus on at the moment. Just get that one win, and it's going to make a world of difference. Obviously, being up against the USA first and at home in Calgary is going to definitely have the momentum on their side. They just need to be able to carry it through. And I'm sure Meehan will be taking all the positives from these games against Belgium and Spain through and, putting them to good use, putting that mentality into the right place, focusing on those things like, seeing out the game, making sure that you're not conceding penalties where you need to. Even, even if you just have to hold the ball for a couple of minutes, a couple of phases, just to get it out, make sure the ref said it's full time, kick it into touch, and that's all you need to do. Um, but yeah, with the Pacific Nations Cup coming up and three of the four spots available, you know, all Canada needs to do is get that win against the USA or get a win if they make it to the fifth and sixth playoff, get the win against whoever they're playing, likely Tonga, if it's that scenario. But that's all it is. All it takes is one win. And if you can get one win, maybe you can get two, maybe you can get three, maybe you can get a few games lined up this autumn that will be against potential Rugby World Cup opposition in Europe. Yet to see, but we will be bringing you those games and those squads when we get them. And if you want to watch any rugby this weekend, the Lions tour continues. They are having their second test this Saturday, and that will be available for Canadians on DAZN. And as we mentioned before, the Canada game versus the USA women will be on August the 1st, and that will be on TSN. We'll bring you the full channel details when we do on our socials. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more episodes as well as our written pieces on our website, rougerugby.ca. You can also find our podcast directly on Spotify, and we have our YouTube channel at the Rouge Rugby. Make sure to like and subscribe, and hit that bell notification to stay up to date with all our videos. We're also available across social media, including Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky, all at the Rouge Rugby. Ed, where can people find you on social media?
Rugby 101 _ 2025, Facebook and YouTube.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Ed, thank you for joining me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.